Brought to you by SAP. SAP helps companies run like never before. Learn more by visiting us online.
Now, each year, PriceWaterhouseCoopers, team of entertainment and media experts, get together to create an unbiased, in-depth forecast for 12 industry segments. The fourth annual edition of PwC's South African Entertainment and Media Outlook was recently released and provided some very interesting insight, especially into the highly profitable video gaming industry. With me in studio to expand on the outlook is Charles Stuart, Associate Director at PriceWaterhouse Cooper. Welcome, Charles. Now, the gaming industry has grown exponentially over the last few years and has also seen a significant shift. I mean, we used to associate it with spotty teenagers in a bedroom somewhere. What's been the push to this growth, and especially over gender and cultural lines?
Well, I mean, I think certainly it's moved significantly away from, like, your traditional, as you say, spotty teenager. You know, some of the most significant growth that we've seen is, in fact, amongst young women like yourself. And, you know, like, we are seeing a multitude of people taking up their sort of time, you know, to be able to play video games. And I think the real driver for this within the South African market is, one, the increased access to the internet, and that's driving a little bit on the, you know, on the online side of things. But the significant growth that we're seeing is really in the mobile gaming space. It really is growing significantly. Console games still continue to dominate the market in terms of spend, but the mobile gaming is fast catching up, and by 2017 we see that mobile and console are going to account for about 40% of the market each. Now,
according to your outlook, PC-based gaming is going down in terms of revenue. Is this an indicative shift of the way people consume games these days?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, people are, you know, more and more wanting to consume games on their own time and wherever they may be. So I think the proliferation of smart devices, so we're seeing, you know, your smartphones, your tablets, etc. People want to be able to take their gaming wherever they're going, and PCs don't offer that same flexibility that I think some of the other platforms do.
From a cost comparative, perspective, though, which is the cheaper option for a typical South African?
Cost is coming down quite a lot, right? But what's interesting to note is mobile games are probably one of the cheapest options, right? I mean, if you think about your downloads, you can get them for free, and you can pay very sort of small amounts to be able to access your mobile gaming. But even in a world of a lot of free downloadable games, we're still seeing the classic video games. You know, your Mario Brothers, for example.
Which has been around since the 80s.
Absolutely, but it still maintains a huge amount of popularity. So I think the message out there is consumers are still willing to pay for quality, and they're willing to pay for the experience. And whereas I think, you know, mobile gaming and, you know, online gaming offers, you know, some of that, your classic video games still offer that sort of enhanced experience often, you know, which is what the consumers are looking for. But
a lot of people aren't willing to pay the 4, 5, 6, even 800 Rand for a game. How impactful is the piracy game?
Piracy, there's a lot of movement in that space, you know. From, you know, some of the consoles, for example, you have to, you know, make, you know, contact with, you know, sort of the online, you know, version of it, you know, on almost a daily basis, or you get shut off, and that obviously irritates a few gamers and things like that. So, you know, they really are working very hard, you know, in that space. But I think the good thing that the video game segment has really done is that they've embraced this whole, you know, migration to digital very, very well. So if you can provide the right content at the right time on the right platform to the right consumer, you know, and at the right price, then typically they won't go and look for pirated stuff elsewhere, because you're giving them what they want. So they'll come to you and they're happy to pay for it.
Let's talk about platforms, consoles. That reminds me of the smartphone market. There's a newer, shinier, better model every day. But what sets the value? What is the competitive advantage? You know, why would you choose a PlayStation over an Xbox and Xbox over a Wii? What's that advantage these days? Well,
I mean, I think a lot of it is sort of personal preference. There's obviously a fair amount of loyalty amongst, you know, once I've been on a PlayStation, I might not necessarily, you know, migrate across to a Wii platform or something like that. But I think for a lot of people, you know, obviously the providers, you know, so the content creators, so your Nintendos, your PlayStations, etc., you know, they're trying to build in that loyalty. And I think it's just about constantly trying to give the right experience so that when that next generation of console comes out, you are sticking with their brand as opposed to possibly, you know, moving to another one. And maybe it's worthwhile a bit of a mention here. South Africa's got an interesting, you know, sort of makeup in this regard. Our consoles tend to last for longer in South Africa, right? So typically a console, you know, gets to sort of 5 or 6 years, and that's generally when it's installed.
So a bit more long-term value.
Based, sort of reaches a peak. Whereas in South Africa, you know, some of them have been around for over 10 years. And I think it's just because they're more expensive for us, yeah, like relative to elsewhere, in the world. So we keep playing them for longer.
Let's talk about tablets. There's a proliferation of tablets in the market as well. They're still relatively expensive, not a high penetration to the likes of mobile, but where's that going?
Well, I think, again, the tablets, the online games is probably where you're seeing the majority of stuff. You are seeing some downloadable stuff, onto the tablets, but again, the gaming experience I don't think is as good as you get, possibly from like a console.
Although I know people are obsessed with Candy Crush and Popcorny and all of these likes.
Absolutely, Angry Birds. But I think, the nice thing about, for example, like if one looks at some of the new consoles, they're coming into the market at, 1,500 rand. You drop that compared to your Apple iPad at 4,500 rand. It's a bit of a cheaper mistake to make. Yeah.
Now the research report was based on South Africa, but you did a comparative analysis with Kenya and Nigeria. How similar or dissimilar are the markets to South Africa?
Quite similar in terms of where we're seeing the growth. Size-wise, almost incomparable. So they're coming off much smaller bases. Obviously, they're exhibiting higher growth, but off these tiny bases to start. Growth-wise, also seeing a lot of growth in the online and the mobile space, but their console and PC games are virtually non-existent. So,
what about mobile?
Mobile, yes, mobile's there, but again, a very small base. So I think for companies, in the console and even the PC space, I think there are some quite significant opportunities there.
And Charles, what is the aspect of the report or the statistic that excites you most about this industry for the year to come?
Well, I think it's like just the growth. You look at it and the world these days, yes, there's talk of like recovery. We look at our GDP, it's not that exciting to look at, but from an entertainment and media perspective in South Africa, we're saying that entertainment media is going to grow at around 10.9%. 5 years, through till 2017, and growth like that is pretty exciting.